And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Today we're taking a look at a game called Urbanization. This is a game by Johnny Ebsen from Queen Games. It's a game about building up, I don't know, it's not necessarily about building a city, but about developing a rural area. You're farming and building buildings. This is a very common theme in games. It's also a theme that tends to draw me in. I like games where you build stuff up. Does this one meet the muster? Is this one good enough? Let's look at it. Here's the board as you play. Actually, there's these large diamonds that you'll place on the board for a 2 or 3 player setup, so that way you can, make the board smaller. But I'm showing you what the board looks like for a 4-player setup. Now, at the beginning of the game, each player is going to get a certain area on the board. They'll put a house in one of these building spots. You'll notice that each of these places on the board has one or two building spots, and also I'll put one of my markers in there to show that that's mine. Now, as the game progresses, you can buy areas that are adjacent to yours, and they cost a number of money tokens that are in. So let's say I pay $1 for this one. I then have to put that dollar in another territory. If I buy this one, I take those $2 and put them in other territories. And so you can see as the game progresses, the cost of the remaining territories is going to be more. These spots that you have here on the board are spots where you can put buildings. As the game progresses, you will be able to upgrade your houses into skyscrapers or add more houses, or even add administrative buildings, which don't need to be placed in a building spot. All 3 of these buildings will give you points as the game progresses. You're also going to be able to get factories. Now, I am absolutely confused as to the difference between a factory and a skyscraper. Obviously, they're different. One's thinner than the other. I'm not sure which is which. I just thought that was kind of an odd design choice in their part. One of them obviously stands up. I mean, you have to decide at the beginning of the game, which is which. But there's 4 different buildings that you'll be building as the game progresses. The game takes place over 6 rounds, and each of those rounds, each player is going to have 4 actions. Before the player takes those actions, though, they're going to go through a deck of profession cards, and each of these cards gives you a special thing. For example, tax collector says collect taxes twice. Normally, you can only do that once per turn. Farmer lets you sow seeds on this card. These spots on the board are for buildings, but they can also be places where you can sow grain as the game progresses, and at the end of each round, you get double the grain back that you sow. If you have the farmer card, you can sow them right on there. So each of these people here has different special abilities that they can use. There's also a mayor card, which goes to the person with the fewest points. They become the start player and they score a victory point. And the cards like this are dumb. Why did you just get a victory point? Because I was in last place. Yay. But anyway, that's just the way the game works. There are other actions that players can take on their turn, and a lot of these actions are so that they can progress their board. Each player has a player board. Let's take a closer look here. This is what your player board looks like at the beginning of the game. Here's where you keep all your grain, and here's where you keep the number of buildings that you have. You're going to start with 1 house, and as you add each house or skyscraper, the amount of buildings that you have increases. And down here is where you keep track of you move this over here every time that you use taxes, so you can only have so many times that you can use taxes. But up here is how many citizens you have. This is going to be at the lowest one of these. So let's say, for example, I get 4 buildings and I have 3 grain, but I only have 1 trade good. That means I only have 1 job available, basically. My citizens are 1. But if I manage to get some more goods, now I have my goods up to 3, my grain is up to 3, and the number of buildings I have is 4, so my number of citizens I have is 3. That's important because after every turn you will score 2 points for every citizen you have. You also have to pay 1 grain for every citizen you have. So you will find that you will be paying grain, and that's one of the 2 main reasons for getting grain. Those goods are gotten by sending, for one of your actions, sending people up here, or sending one of your worker placements up here to get, for example, a gray cube or 2 orange cubes, or getting money. And when all these spots are filled up, you can actually take one of these in front of you, one of these factories, and when you put that factory in front of you, later on you'll be able to take goods from your card, put those goods on that sawmill, or whatever it is, because more of them will come out, a windmill, weaving mill, pottery, etc. You'll be able to put those goods on there to score points. So the ways that you score points is by using your factories, by building buildings, because building buildings gives you points, and by having citizens at the end of each turn. And there's other things that you do. You'll get grain, like I said. You can sow grain in fields and so on and so forth. That's the basic game. The game will run after a certain number of turns. Whoever has the most points is the winner. There's money that you're going to be needing to build these buildings and to buy factories and such. And so you'll need to get that money, of course, by taxing your people or by running factories. And money is actually going to be very tight in this game. If you play with the expansion, and I would consider that almost a must, at the top of the board, you're going to place all these different cards. Each of these cards is placed in a specific spot up here, and they have different colors and numbers of the different goods to show you. And then you can move to those spots and pay the price to get an invention. For example, you might get the telegraph. All your white factories produce at least 2 goods. Or the traction engine. You pay only $1 for each grain marker, no matter what the stated price. Like, for example, down here, if you buy grain from these 2 barns, it costs 1, but here it costs 2, and here it costs 3. But if you have this card, it always costs 1, or a sewing machine. So you can get these factories, which will give you, or get these inventions, which will give you a special ability for the rest of the game. So anyway, that's really a quick rundown on how the game works. Most points is the winner. There's a lot going on in Urbanization. First of all, if you're going to play the game at all, you've got to use the included expansion of those inventions. That provides a lot of variety, and I think it's a lot of fun to play with special abilities that you have that other people don't have. Let's talk about some good things about Urbanization. First of all, I really like the fact that the size of your city is determined by the lowest of the houses you have, and the food you have, and the jobs you have, basically. That makes thematic sense. It's interesting. It gets you a lot of points. Incidentally, that gives you the most points during a game, so you really can't afford to mess around and not pay attention to those points. The factories that you build is interesting, although mechanically and thematically, I had a really hard time with this one. It just feels awkward. You put your people on these spaces to get these resources, then you buy the factory, and when you buy the factory, you then use the resources to get points or money or whatever, and it just, I don't know how to explain it. It just didn't feel right. That's very vague. I didn't get that. But anyhow, building the houses and the skyscrapers and the office buildings and the administrative buildings and all that works. Money is very tight in this game. And one of the things I really enjoyed about the game are the roles that you can take, except for the mayor. I hate stupid catch-up mechanics. But I like taking the role. This person might give me extra food. I really need food this turn. Or I want to buy the factories for a cheaper price or what have you. And I like that. That was a good part of the game. I guess where the game fell down to me was it was very tight. And some people like these very tight games. But Urbanization feels like if you misstep at all in any direction, the game is just, you've lost. You really got to pay attention. You can't overspend on things. If you're ready to do something and someone takes that action before you, and now that was the factory you're going to buy, and that can mess up your turn, and now you don't do, and you can essentially lose the game on a specific turn. I like the buying the different fields. As you buy them, the price of all the other fields goes up. That's a neat mechanic. Planting grain to get grain, we've seen that in other games like Agricola and so on. But that's fun and interesting. But for some reason, overall, the whole game just leaves me cold. I understand there's a lot of good features in this game, and I think some people are going to like it. The theme is there, but the theme feels almost like work. I feel like the game is making me, all right, what are we going to do this turn? All right, I'll get some food for my people. All right, I'll build this building. All right, I'll send my people to the factory. And I'm looking for games to be fun. And some of you are saying, but Vasel, this is fun for me. And I understand that. But if you're looking, I want to play a game that's kind of like, woohoo, woo, I'm having a good time here. This game I felt like I was like, okay, I must not make a mistake. I must fill in the right spots here. I must do the right things here. And that, to me, is not something that I want to keep going back to. Urbanization, I will qualify it as a good game, but it is definitely not for me because it's too much effort on my part, and I don't really necessarily want a game to make me give that much effort without giving me an exhilarating feel and response, and this one does not do that. Has some nice bits, has some nice ideas, and it all does work together well, but the sum of the parts is not, and the total is not really greater than the sum of the parts, and that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find the latest board game news at Dicetowernews.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Fun Again Games, the world's best game source. Fun Again Games has over 5,000 games available. Check them out at funagain.com.
Shut the door.